Hello, friends. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Here, I share a brand new story every day. If you enjoy my videos, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was just a few months ago, back when I was still living with my family in the old Willow Creek Manor. Having recently graduated from high school and finished my exams, I often found myself alone at home. My parents were frequently out, and my siblings were always busy with school or extracurricular activities. One evening, both my siblings were away at sleepovers, and my parents had gone out for dinner. I had just returned from a long walk and decided to relax in the bathroom. I have a habit of recording voice memos when I'm bored, and this particular evening was no exception. Sitting on the sink table, I had been in the bathroom for about an hour, just talking to myself. Suddenly, out of nowhere, there was a loud boom. It didn't sound like something had exploded or fallen. Instead, it felt as if something had slammed into the wall with immense force. I immediately fell silent, the seconds dragging by like years as I tried to comprehend what I had just heard. Then I heard footsteps. My bathroom is right next to the stairs, and the sound was coming from upstairs. The footsteps were faint, as if the person was wearing socks, but I knew the sound well enough to recognize it as human. My heart stopped, and I froze, waiting to see a shadow or some sign of movement. However, the footsteps never descended the stairs. Realizing that whoever or whatever was up there would have to pass by the bathroom to leave, I decided not to wait around. I bolted out of the bathroom, ran down the stairs, and dashed out the front door, not daring to look back. I stood outside, staring at the house, trying to make sense of what had happened. After a few minutes, I knew I couldn't stay outside all night. I called my friend Sarah and asked her to come over to help me search the house. She arrived about 20 minutes later, and we cautiously entered the house together. Keeping the main door wide open, I armed myself with an umbrella while Sarah held a kitchen knife. We searched the entire house from top to bottom, but found nothing out of the ordinary, except the back door was wide open. A few days later, I was home alone again. I was standing in the entrance hall, looking for something, when I heard a phone ring. It wasn't a familiar ringtone, and it stopped as abruptly as it had started. Confused and unnerved, I stood there, trying to decide whether to leave or face whatever was in the house again. Summoning my courage, I ran to the kitchen, but found no one there. I searched every corner, every drawer, but there was no phone or any other device that could have made the sound. It was as if the ring had come from nowhere. This period of time was incredibly unsettling. At first, the strange occurrences frightened me, but as they continued, I found myself growing more and more frustrated. I just wanted whatever it was to leave and for things to return to normal. Despite the fear and confusion, I never found out what caused those disturbances. Willow Creek Manor remained a place of mystery and unease, and I was relieved when I finally moved out, leaving the strange occurrences behind. It was a chilly autumn night last year, around 10 p.m. The entire family was home. My parents were downstairs engrossed in a movie, my sister was in her room presumably on one of her endless video calls, and my little brother was fast asleep in his bed. I was in my room, as usual, with the door firmly closed. I always kept it that way to maintain the aesthetic of my fairy-lit sanctuary. As I was watching something on my phone, I heard my door creak open. Glancing up, I saw a hand and arm pushing the door ajar, but no one stepped in. Annoyed, I called out, "Close the door, please," but received no response. Frustrated, I got up and headed to my sister's room across the hall. "What did you want?" I asked her. She looked up from her laptop, clearly irritated. "What are you talking about? I'm on a call. Go away," she snapped. I told her that someone had opened my door, but she just shrugged and went back to her conversation. Next, I went downstairs to confront my parents. "Did either of you open my door just now?" I asked. They both shook their heads, insisting they hadn't moved from the couch for the past hour. That left only one possibility: my 7-year-old brother. I marched back upstairs and entered his room, fully expecting to catch him in the act and have him burst into giggles. But there he was, sound asleep. I knew the difference between his real and fake sleeping. When he pretended to sleep, his eyelids would twitch, but this time they were completely still. His bed lights, which automatically turned off after an hour, were off, confirming he had been asleep for a while. Baffled, I returned downstairs and told my dad what had happened. Someone opened my door. I saw an arm, and it wasn't any of you. Can you check the house? Reluctantly, he agreed. We searched every corner of Blackwood Manor, but found nothing unusual. Despite the thorough search, I couldn't shake the feeling of having seen that arm. It was clear, unmistakable. Someone or something had opened my door that night. The mystery remained unsolved, leaving me with an eerie feeling that someone unseen was wandering the halls of Blackwood Manor, slipping in and out of rooms without a trace. When I was about 10, my mother took me to the bustling city of Ravenwood for a routine doctor's appointment. The city was a maze of streets and alleys, and even though we had a map, it was easy to get lost. After the appointment, we started our journey back home, but my mother, unfamiliar with the city's labyrinthine roads, made a couple of wrong turns. Before we knew it, we found ourselves in a part of Ravenwood that was notorious for its high crime rates and dilapidated buildings. The streets were eerily quiet, with only the occasional figure lurking in the shadows. My mother, clearly anxious, rolled down her window to ask for directions from a well-dressed man in a sleek, black car. Despite his polished appearance, there was something unsettling about him. Perhaps it was the cold glint in his eyes or the predatory smile that curled his lips. "Just follow me, ma'am," he said smoothly. "I live near there too and am just headed home." He then proceeded to turn his car around completely, an action that should have raised alarms but didn't. My mother, relieved at finding help, muttered something about how she couldn't believe he was nice enough to go out of his way for us. She started to turn our car to follow him. At that moment, I was too young to question why he would need to turn around to get to a place he was supposedly already headed. It seems my mother didn't question it either. As we were about to follow him, an elderly man with a grizzled beard and a worn-out cap who had been walking his dog nearby suddenly approached our car. He knocked on the passenger window urgently, and my mother rolled it down a crack. "Don't follow him," he warned in a gravelly voice. "He's not taking you where you want to go. He's leading you into the old warehouse district. It's dangerous there." My mother hesitated, confusion and fear mingling on her face. The well-dressed man in the black car had noticed the exchange and, realizing his plan was foiled, sped off down the street, tires screeching. The elderly man gave us proper directions back to the main highway, and we thanked him profusely. As we drove away, my mother was visibly shaken. Later, we learned from the news that the area we had nearly been led into was infamous for its abandoned warehouses, which were often used by criminals for illicit activities. It was a place where people went missing, never to be seen again. That day left an indelible mark on both of us. My mother became more cautious and skeptical, always double-checking directions and never asking strangers for help again. As for me, the experience taught me a valuable lesson about trusting my instincts and the importance of paying attention to details, no matter how minor they seem. Years later, I still think about that day. I often wonder what might have happened if the kind stranger hadn't intervened. The encounter in Ravenwood served as a stark reminder of the lurking dangers in the world and the importance of vigilance and intuition in navigating them. I never believed in ghosts. I really didn't. At least, that's what I thought until I moved into my new house, Hawthorne Manor. It was an old Victorian-style house nestled at the edge of a dense forest. The house had a charm that drew me in, with its ornate woodwork and towering spires, but little did I know it also harbored secrets that would challenge my disbelief. The first night after I moved in, I began to hear noises. They were faint at first, like the sound of footsteps echoing through the long hallways or a soft thumping against the walls. I brushed it off, thinking it was just the house settling or perhaps a rodent that had found its way inside. But then there were other strange occurrences that were harder to explain. I would feel sudden gusts of wind, even though all the doors and windows were tightly shut. The air would grow cold in certain spots, and I would find furniture slightly shifted from where I remembered placing it. A week in, the noises began to change. The footsteps and thumping evolved into unsettling cracking and swishing sounds, like someone or something was moving through the walls and floors. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself it was just my imagination or some structural quirk of the old house. But deep down, I felt a growing unease. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I installed cameras and wiretaps throughout the house. I wanted to see if there was some logical explanation, maybe a prankster or an animal making its home in the attic. But each night as I reviewed the footage, I found nothing. No signs of intruders, no animals, just an empty house filled with shadows and strange sounds. One evening, I fell asleep while watching TV. I had a particularly bad nightmare, one filled with dark corridors and whispering voices. When I jolted awake, the TV screen was blank, the room bathed in an eerie, dim light. My eyes were glued to the screen, and as the fog of sleep lifted, a chilling realization struck me. I hadn't turned the TV off. Heart pounding, I went to check the camera footage. As I reviewed the recordings, the intro of my favorite TV show suddenly blared from the living room, even though the screen had been blank moments before. Terror gripped me, and I started chanting, "I don't believe in ghosts," over and over, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. Then I felt a cold breath against my left ear, and a shrill whisper cut through the darkness. Neither did I. I spun around, but there was no one there. The room was empty, yet I could feel a presence, something unseen but undeniably there. Panic surged through me as I backed away, my mind racing. I couldn't explain what had just happened, but I knew I couldn't stay in that room any longer. I fled to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. The next day, I searched for answers. I delved into the history of Hawthorne Manor, hoping to uncover some clue about its haunted past. I discovered that the house had a long, troubled history. It had been built in the late 1800s by a wealthy industrialist named Charles Hawthorne, who lived there with his family. Tragedy struck when his wife Eleanor died under mysterious circumstances. Her death was ruled an accident, but rumors of foul play and ghostly sightings soon spread through the town. Over the years, subsequent owners reported strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, inexplicable cold spots, and disembodied voices. Many of them left the house abruptly, unable to bear the haunting any longer. Some even claimed to have seen the ghost of Eleanor Hawthorne, wandering the halls in her flowing white gown, searching for something or someone. As I read these accounts, the pieces of my own experiences began to fall into place. The sounds, the cold gusts of wind, the moving furniture, it all pointed to the presence of a restless spirit. I realized that by moving into Hawthorne Manor, I had unknowingly disturbed whatever lay dormant within its walls. Determined to put an end to the haunting, I sought the help of a local paranormal investigator, Dr. Evelyn Gray. She was a seasoned expert with a reputation for uncovering the truth behind haunted places. When I contacted her and explained my situation, she agreed to visit the manor and conduct an investigation. Dr. Gray arrived a few days later, armed with an array of equipment designed to detect and document paranormal activity. We spent several nights together exploring the house, setting up cameras, and recording audio. Each night, the activity intensified. We heard footsteps echoing through the halls, saw doors open and close on their own, and felt the temperature drop suddenly in certain rooms. One night, as we reviewed the footage, we captured something extraordinary. A shadowy figure appeared on the screen, moving through the living room where I had first felt the cold breath on my ear. The figure was indistinct, but its presence was undeniable. It lingered near the TV, as if reliving the moment it had whispered to me. Dr. Gray was convinced that the spirit was indeed Eleanor Hawthorne. She suggested we try to communicate with her, to understand her pain and help her find peace. We conducted a seance in the living room, surrounded by flickering candles and the dim glow of our equipment. "Eleanor," Dr. Gray called out, "we know you are here. We want to help you. Please tell us what you need." For a moment, there was only silence. Then the temperature in the room dropped dramatically, and we heard a faint whisper, barely audible but filled with sorrow. "Charles." Dr. Gray and I exchanged glances. It was clear that Eleanor's spirit was still searching for her husband, Charles. But Charles had died many years ago, leaving Eleanor trapped in a perpetual state of longing and despair. We decided to hold a final seance, this time in the master bedroom where Eleanor had spent her last moments. Surrounded by relics of the past, we called out to her again. Eleanor, Charles is no longer here. He has passed on. You need to let go and find peace. Your time in this world has ended. The room grew colder, and the candles flickered as if caught in a gust of wind. We heard a soft sobbing, then a voice, clearer than before. Thank you. The temperature gradually returned to normal, and the sense of presence lifted. We knew that Eleanor had finally found the peace she had longed for. The house felt different, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. In the following weeks, the strange occurrences ceased. The footsteps, the cold spots, the whispers, all gone. Hawthorne Manor was no longer haunted by its tragic past. I felt a sense of relief and closure, knowing that Eleanor's spirit had moved on. Though I had started as a skeptic, my experiences in Hawthorne Manor had changed me. I no longer dismissed the possibility of ghosts and the supernatural. I had witnessed firsthand the power of unresolved emotions and the importance of finding peace in the afterlife. Hawthorne Manor became my home, a place of history and mystery, but no longer of fear. And as I continued to live there, I felt a deep connection to its past, knowing that I had played a part in bringing peace to a restless spirit. After Grandma passed away, we stayed at the house the Navy had given Grandpa for the last time. With both of them gone, the house would soon be passed on to another Navy veteran. The house, known as Admiral's House, had always felt like a sanctuary, filled with memories of holidays and family gatherings. Little did I know, it would soon become the backdrop of an eerie encounter I would never forget. That night, I slept alone in my Uncle Robert's old bedroom. Uncle Robert was my mom's younger brother, and his room had always been a cozy, familiar place for me. I played games on my phone until sleepiness finally overcame me. At around 3 a.m., I woke up with a pressing need to pee. The bathroom was located in a dark corridor that led to the garage. To get there, I had to pass through the large family and TV room, Grandpa's old study, the dining room, and the kitchen. The house was indeed vast, and the thought of navigating it in the middle of the night was daunting. I made my way down the corridor, the old wooden floors creaking under my feet. As I passed the door to the garage, I noticed the old maid's room, now uninhabited, standing silently. I entered the bathroom, the cool tiles a stark contrast to the warm carpeted floors. As I did my business, I heard humming coming from the direction of the old maid's room. The tune sounded strangely familiar, and it sent chills down my spine. I quickly finished up, washed my hands, and prepared to head back to my room. As I stepped into the corridor, the humming grew louder, but it wasn't coming from the maid's room anymore. It was coming from the TV room. My heart pounded in my chest as I slowly made my way toward the sound. There, sitting leisurely on the couch, was Grandma. She was watching static on the TV, still wearing the hospital clothes she had died in. Her corpse had been transported to the morgue earlier that day, yet here she was, as real as ever. She turned her head to look at me, her eyes locking onto mine. She smiled, a serene, almost knowing smile, and then stood up. She didn't float or vanish into thin air. She walked, turning toward the guest room and disappearing from sight. I stood there, frozen in place, my mind racing to make sense of what I had just seen. Eventually, the paralysis of fear gave way to a desperate need for comfort. The last time I had shared a bed with my mom was when I was 8 years old. But that night at 16, I quietly snuck into her bed, seeking the safety and warmth that only a mother can provide. I stayed awake until morning, my mind replaying the sight of Grandma in the TV room over and over. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that Grandma had come back to say goodbye. Maybe she wanted to ensure we knew she was at peace, or perhaps she had one last message to convey. The family gathered to sort through the house and reminisce about the good times we had shared there. Stories flowed, laughter mixed with tears, and through it all, I kept my encounter to myself, unsure if anyone would believe me. On the final day, as we were packing up the last of Grandma and Grandpa's belongings, I found myself drawn to the TV room. The couch where Grandma had sat seemed to hold a lingering warmth. I sat down, closed my eyes, and whispered a quiet goodbye, hoping that wherever she was, she could hear me. As we locked the doors to Admiral's house for the last time, I felt a sense of closure. The house had been a place of love and family, and now it was time to let it go. But the memory of that night, of seeing Grandma one last time, would stay with me forever, a testament to the enduring bonds of family and the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding. For as long as I can remember, sleep has never been a sanctuary for me. From the tender age of 5, I have been tormented by sleep paralysis, a phenomenon where the mind awakens, but the body remains frozen, trapped in a state of limbo between dreams and reality. This cruel affliction plagued me every night without fail. I grew up in the quiet town of Willow Creek, nestled deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. Our house, an old Victorian mansion, had been in the family for generations. Its creaking floorboards and whispering walls held stories of their own, but none were as terrifying as the one I am about to share. In Willow Creek, tales of the supernatural were common, and everyone had their own version of a ghost story. But for me, the horror was personal and unrelenting. My family followed an ancient tradition that blended elements of Christianity with local folklore. I often heard that sleep paralysis was caused by malevolent spirits or demons lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce on their unsuspecting prey. Every night, as I lay in bed beside my mother, I would pray fervently for protection. My prayers were a mix of ancient incantations and personal pleas, a desperate attempt to ward off the darkness that awaited me. Despite my fear, I would often challenge the unseen entity, invoking the name of Saint Michael, the archangel, to shield me from harm. The dreams always began the same way. As I drifted off to sleep, a kaleidoscope of colors would burst into my mind, swirling and twisting until they formed a grotesque rainbow. Then I would feel an invisible force pulling me downward, as if I were being sucked into the very bowels of the earth. The descent was rapid and terrifying, and I would land in the gnarled hands of a witch, her eyes gleaming with malevolence. The witch, a nightmarish figure, draped in tattered black robes, would drag me to a jagged rock altar deep in a shadowy forest. She would chant in an ancient, guttural language, her voice resonating with dark power. Despite the fear gripping my heart, I would find myself dressed like a medieval princess, a stark contrast to the horror surrounding me. The witch's bony fingers would trace intricate patterns on my skin as she performed her dark rituals. One night, the dream altered slightly. Instead of landing immediately in the witch's grasp, I found myself in a dark, twisted forest. The trees seemed to move, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. Shadows danced around me, whispering my name. Each step I took echoed in the silence, amplifying the sense of dread that gripped me. As I ventured deeper into the forest, I stumbled upon a clearing where the witch awaited me. Her eyes gleamed with a sinister light, and the ground beneath her seemed to pulsate with dark energy. She extended her hand, and I felt an invisible force compelling me to approach her. "You cannot escape," she hissed, her voice sending shivers down my spine. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were encased in cement. Summoning all my courage, I shouted, "Saint Michael, protect me!" The forest echoed with my plea, and the witch recoiled, her grip on me loosening. Tashar. On another night, the dream took me to a place I had never seen before, a realm of mirrors. Everywhere I looked, there were reflections of myself, distorted and twisted. The air was thick with an eerie silence, and my own reflection seemed to mock me. The witch appeared in one of the mirrors, her face contorted into a sinister grin. "Your fears will consume you," she taunted. Each mirror showed a different version of me, some crying, some screaming, and others standing in silent terror. The witch's voice grew louder, reverberating through the mirror realm. Desperate to break free, I closed my eyes and began to chant, "Saint Michael, protect me." When I opened my eyes, the mirrors shattered, and I found myself back in the familiar dark forest, but the witch's presence was weaker. One particularly harrowing night, I found myself in an endless corridor, its walls lined with ancient, flickering torches. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, and each step I took felt like walking through quicksand. The witch's laughter echoed through the corridor, growing louder and more menacing with each step. I saw doors lining the corridor, each marked with strange symbols. I tried opening one, but it led to another identical corridor. Panic set in as I realized I was trapped in an infinite maze. The witch's laughter grew louder, filling the air with a sense of impending doom. As despair threatened to overwhelm me, I fell to my knees and prayed with all my might, "Saint Michael, protect me!" A brilliant light pierced through the darkness, and the corridor began to collapse. The walls crumbled, revealing the night sky above. I woke up with a start, my heart racing, but relieved to be free from the nightmare's grip. The climax of my ordeal came on a stormy night. Thunder rumbled in the distance as I drifted into sleep. This time, I found myself in a desolate wasteland, the sky dark and ominous. The witch stood before me, more powerful and terrifying than ever. "You cannot escape me," she snarled, her eyes burning with hatred. She raised her hands and the ground beneath me trembled. Dark tendrils of energy snaked towards me, threatening to engulf me. For the first time, I felt truly powerless. But then, a blinding light erupted from the heavens, illuminating the wasteland. Saint Michael descended, his fiery sword held high. With a single powerful strike, he banished the witch into oblivion. The light grew brighter, engulfing everything in its radiance. I felt a warmth and peace I had never known before. The dream shattered, and I awoke to the sound of rain tapping against my window. The nightmares had finally ended. From that night on, the witch never returned, and I slept peacefully for the first time in years. I still live in Willow Creek, and the old Victorian mansion remains as eerie as ever. But now, it holds no fear for me. I know that, no matter what darkness may come, I am protected by a force greater than any evil that lurks in the shadows. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share the video. See you next time.